Hello, everyone. I'm Neena Gopal. Welcome to Global Express. This is where we take a good hard look at events that have a direct impact on India. Today, we turn not just to the G7 summit in Alberta, Canada, that India, despite all the speculation that it wouldn't get an invite, was finally invited to, but also to the return of Pakistan to the US's most favored list against the backdrop of this alarming escalation in the Middle East with the Israeli strike overnight on Iran's nuclear and military sites, as well as the capital Tehran. This is the great game. Let's also look at the arrival of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Canada. Canada's new Prime Minister Mark Carney's invitation to Prime Minister Narendra Modi for the June 15th to 17th event in Kananaskis came at the very last minute, possibly after a back channel reach out. Carney said India could not be ignored as it was a major economic force. But allegations that Khalistani separatists in Canada were targeted remain the elephant in the room. India did host the G20 summit last year, where Justin Trudeau's and Modi's tit for tat turned pretty ugly. Both sides withdrew their respective high commissioners, they reduced their mission strength. Indian diplomats, however, still say they are targets. So how do we navigate this path forward? I'd also like to raise the question on how Prime Minister Modi will address India's view on Pakistan's use of terror as an instrument of foreign policy at this event. Post Operation Sindhu, we've sent out teams of parliamentarians to tell the world of Pakistan's role in fomenting terror. Will Modi raise the revival of this counter-terrorism partnership that has emerged now between Rawalpindi and Washington when and if he meets the US President Donald Trump? The Trump doctrine looks at bilateral ties purely from an economic point of view. Tariffs, imports of rare earths. India is beating the terror down, reminding the US of how it had just extradited from the US the 2611 conspirator Tawahur Rana. Now, widening a circle of conflict further, Israel has attacked Iran, killing the Iranian commander, General Bagheri. The US, which was holding talks with Iran on its nuclear weaponization, says it had prior notice. So Prime Minister Modi's arrival in Canada for the G7 summit couldn't come at a more critical moment in time. Will he raise the issue of Pakistan being restored as a frontline ally, a major non-NATO partner by the Trump administration? I mean, this is a reversal of the 15-year-old policy on Pakistan when Washington has veered towards Delhi. Is India no longer seen in Washington as a major non-NATO ally? Not enough of a counterweight to China as Pakistan could be? Talking to us today about changing dynamics and the multiple challenges before Delhi are three experts. Ambassador K P Fabian is a former Indian diplomat who was posted to Canada, Austria, Finland, and Italy, as well as Iran and Qatar during the first Gulf War, when he coordinated the evacuation of hundreds of thousands of refugees fleeing Kuwait when it was attacked by Iraq's strongman Saddam Hussein. Working with a number of think tanks, he's also a published author with books on Iraq, on Indian diplomacy, and the Arab Spring. Welcome, Ambassador Fabian. To give us a perspective on the issues that have driven a wedge between India and Canada is the award-winning journalist Prabhjot Singh, who's based in Canada and writes on the Indian and Sikh diaspora, particularly on the India-Canada relationship. Welcome, Mr. Prabhjot Singh. And last but not least, Amit Kumar, a research analyst at the Takshashila Institution in the Indo-Pacific Studies program. He has a particular focus on China's foreign policy, its domestic policy, and of course, India-China's security issues. Welcome, Mr. Amit Kumar. My first question is to you, Ambassador Fabian. We'll start with a quick look at the Iran and Israeli confrontation that has blown up just last night. Israel has attacked nuclear sites in Tabriz and Kermanshah and the underground nuclear facility in Natanz. Bushehr has remained untouched so far. Some 200 Israeli fighter jets attacked cities, including the capital Tehran. The head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps is reported to have died. Iran is now countered with 100 drones But the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, has censured Tehran for the first time in 20 years. Iran is completely unfazed. It's announced that it will establish a third enrichment facility. It will upgrade its centrifuges. It's refusing to give in to pressure from the US to dial down its nuclear weaponization. You've served in Iran, Ambassador. This is not the first time that Iran and Israel have, have poised at this point of confrontation. So where could this lead? Because we know that Israel has the Iron Dome and has the ability to counter Iran militarily. But I mean, there is a question. It's a very critical part of the world, which any violence and wars in the past have always impacted trade routes, shipping routes. And my last question on the subject: why did the U.S. give the Israelis the green light to attack Iran? It had stopped them in the past.
Well, may I continue? May I start?
Yes, Ambassador.
Thank you. Well, you have very well explained the current situation. As regards Israel, we should take note of the fact that on Sunday, Iran and the United States were going to meet in Oman. And earlier, Prime Minister Netanyahu had said that he would wait for the Iran-American talks to collapse before he takes military action. Probably he said that only to mislead Iran. And we should imagine that he has been planning for this for a while. And there are domestic and other reasons. The domestic reasons are that Prime Minister Netanyahu himself is in some political trouble. As you know, the Knesset, there was a resolution to dissolve it. Now, that was defeated. And there are corruption charges against Netanyahu, and hearings are supposed to go on. So that is point number one. Point number two is that, you raised the question whether the United States give the green signal. Well, all that I can say is that it did not give the red signal. It gave at least, the yellow signal so that the traffic could move. And as we know, President Trump has said excellent about what Israel did. So America is playing not a straight game, and it will be the goal of President Trump that after getting beaten by Israel, Iran will sign on the dotted line. Now the question, Iran sign? Well, I do not know, but I doubt it. I believe that Iran has the ability, limited, but has the ability to retaliate. And you mentioned about the Iron Dome. Well, Iron Dome is very powerful, but there is no dome which can give you mathematical certainty that all the missiles and drones will be, shot down.
Ambassador, that's exactly what happened in April last year. The Iron Dome wasn't absolutely, invulnerable. The Iranians did penetrate it at two points.
Yeah. And now coming to G7, I should imagine we should take what the host has said. The Prime Minister of Canada has said that he wants to make it very brief. He wants to make it very agreeable to Trump. And I suppose, it will be difficult to find much space multilaterally for what India has to raise.
Yes.
Of course, it can be raised bilaterally. Now, coming to that, India-Canada reset of relations, I read in the Globe and Mail, Canadian newspaper, that when he was sort of attacked for inviting Prime Minister Modi, Carney said that, he had also made it clear that there will be discussions on accountability, because as you know, Niger's killing, the anniversary is on the 18th of June. And these meetings are 15th, 17th, and it's in Alberta. Alberta has a sizable, well, comparatively, Sikh population. And in any case, the Khalistanis are very mobile. So one should expect demonstrations, but it is for the government of Canada to make sure that they are peaceful.
Okay. So, Mr. Prabhjot Singh, to bring you in as the G7 begins, let's look at the issue that has brought Canada and India to this pass. I mean, why did virtually every report bring up the Khalistan issue as being central to Prime Minister Modi's attendance at the summit this weekend? I mean, the fact is that, you know, the G7 brings together the world's most powerful industrial democracies, the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, Germany, France, Italy, and Japan. This is not a bilateral visit. I mean, it's not about India, Canada. So why was Khalistan seen as relevant to an invitation to the G7?
Nina, this is one thing which is being debated upon here in Canada. And lots of people, they are divided. Even the Sikh community is divided. If Sukh Thaliwal has said it's not a right decision, he's a member of the ruling Liberal caucus, and a former premier, the first Indian premier of a Canadian province, Ujjal Dosanjh, is in support of inviting Modi. So the opinion in the Sikh community itself is divided. Some Sikhs have welcomed it, and many others, they like pro-Khalistani, they have opposed it. Even the World Sikh Organization chief, Balpreet Singh, they have opposed it. They said when a country is fighting, they had set up a commission to look into foreign interference and killing of a Canadian on Canadian soil by what they allege with credible allegation of India's participation. So they said, since the issue has not been settled, issue is still under legal adjudication. Unless it's decided, India should not, Canada should not have invited Prime Minister Modi, because the feelings of the Sikhs and many Sikhs, they fear that they have threats to their lives, as was stated by Mr. Balpreet Singh, as I mentioned, of World Sikh Organization. He says a number of Sikhs have been continuously getting threats from agencies supported by Government of India. So that is the situation. That's why, since that issue remains in the boiling pot, they don't want India and Canada should hold a dialogue till that issue is resolved. Though Prime Minister Carney said that whatever the law enforcement, that will continue as it is, and since Canada respects rule of law and all the procedures will be followed. But they say how long they will have to wait for justice and how long they will have to wait to live peacefully in Canada. Why they should be getting threats, and also not only threats to their lives, but also extortions are on the rise. So Government of Canada normally is very open on that. They say people can hold any peaceful protest, so they are not getting into any country's sovereign issues. So as long as people have a right to express, so they respect that right of expression. But Government of India has been taking it up. No, Canadian soil is being used for anti-India campaigns. Yeah, activity, lot of activity, and people hold demonstrations, they attack, and even they threaten Indian diplomats and things like this.
So this is if I can just butt in for a minute and ask you this question. I mean, yeah. Mr. Carney, the Prime Minister, has publicly said that one of his 3 core missions is protecting our communities and countering foreign interference and transnational crime. Is this a indirect reference to the Khalistan issue? India.
Yeah, because now Carney is trying to buy peace with all the communities. So he has already taken, you see, in Canada, as everybody mentions, has a huge Indian population, 1.8 million people, out of which only 8 lakhs or 8 lakhs are Punjabi Sikhs. The rest are from rest of India. There are Gujus, there are Hindus, there are Tamilians, there are people from other parts of India. But Canada is essentially being recognized as Sikh-dominated country because the Sikhs have been in the political process for a long time.
I see.
They have completed 75 years in Canadian politics, starting with a council membership of in 1950. Now in 75 years, now there are about 24 of them in parliament. Out of them, only 4 are non-Sikhs. Rest all are Sikhs. So that's why the allegation is always the Sikh MPs, whichever party they belong to, they are normally pro-Khalistanis, as was the previous chief of the New Democratic Party, Jagmeet Singh. Now he lost election. Jagmeet Singh Dhaliwal is Dhaliwal.
How did he lose?
He lost because NDP was playing a different game in parliament, and it's not only that Jagmeet Dhaliwal, even the leader of the opposition who was destined to be the prime minister, P. Repolivre, he lost. He lost. So both the leaders.
So to go back to what Prime Minister Carney says, he's also told Parliament very specifically that Prime Minister Modi has agreed to a dialogue on law enforcement. Does this mean that India is reassessing its policy on Khalistan leaders based in Canada? I mean, as you said, 1.86 million Canadians, out of whom 8 lakhs are Sikhs. So. And is there a summit level meeting, projected to happen between Prime Minister Carney and Prime Minister Modi? Will India be open to that? And will it then, I suppose, bring up Khalistan and also the free trade agreement, Mr. Singh, that was scrapped at the very last minute?
You see, Nina, one thing is very clear. When Carney invited Prime Minister Modi, he didn't even talk to Liberal caucus. So there was the ruling party members, they felt it's such an important decision, especially in light of the relations we have with India. So why he didn't talk to caucus? He invited from Saudi Arabia also, from India also. The two leaders, people, the Liberal caucus felt very agitated. Even Sukh Dhaliwal, the member I am talking about, he is the longest serving Sikh MP as of now. So he said he met Carney yesterday, and he wanted him to stay strong and talk about the issues. And Carney said yes, he would. But the issues are like when Canada had set up a committee and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had raised it and said on the floor of the House that there was a credible allegation of India's interference, and that inquiry, and then there was an inquiry by Parliament, House of Commons Committee. So he said what you have done on that, and if he is coming, if you think because of the changing geopolitical scenario, now Canada has to look for new trade partners after the trade between Canada and the US is very badly impacted by the new tariff regime of Donald Trump. So Canada has to look for new avenues. So Canada is reaching out both to China and India as probable substitutes for what the trade it's losing to US. So, and Canada is under pressure because Canadian economy is in very bad shape, and whatever they say because of the steel and aluminum industry and the auto industry and other industries and the export of natural resources, all are impacted. So then they said, why he didn't talk to people, consult people because of taking such a big policy decision.
Yeah.
That is the issue. And similarly, the people who owe their allegiance to pro-Khalistan elements, they also raise the same voice. They're saying why government of Canada didn't talk to its own people before deciding somebody whom they have been alleging to be interfering in their sovereign affairs. So that is the issue which is being debated upon here in Canada as well, because now there's nothing local, everything is global. Everything
That's
people
right.
know the world over, okay, what's happening in Canada and what's happening in India and what's happening elsewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Kumar, if I can bring you in, just tell us, if you could pick up on what Mr. Singh has said about, trade. How is that meeting going to go when Donald Trump arrives? He's already, pissed off so many, Canadians by calling it a 53rd state of the United States. Now, the trade and tariffs are impacting relations. Will this see a change, as Mr. Singh rightly pointed out, will this see a change in the way Canada uh, reaches out to India? Will it sort of skirt Carney's Canada, skirt the Khalistan issue and, push for trade and see India as an alternative to the US?
I see. I'm not quite an expert on India-Canada relations, or neither do I follow Canada's domestic politics. But yeah, one thing I think has changed Canada's dynamics with India is one, that there was largely an agreement, uh, a recognition that adopting a hard line may not get Canada anywhere, may not be able to get India to cooperate, and so therefore there was some requirement or adjustment on Canada's part to be done, and maybe therefore India has now also agreed, as per Mr. Carney's statements, on a dialogue on law enforcement, etc. The second factor, I think, which might have impacted this dynamic between India and Canada, and the fact that Modi was invited, although there were pressures from other countries as well, is the fact that Trump has come to power for a second time. And as you mentioned, that he did make his intentions very clear, that he would want Canada as his 51st state. And the trade tensions, despite the free trade agreement that they had concluded during his first term, was itself under scrutiny. Trump called it a bad deal, and then you saw Trump slapping uh, tariff on both, including Canada and other rest of the world. So that has created some friction. Again, until Biden was there, I think some conversations around mutual values, etc., and respect for values could have been done with their US counterparts, and therefore it was slightly easier for the Canadians to get US to tighten the screws or take their positions. But Trump is no such guy. Trump does not has no regard or considerations for those kind of issues. In fact, Trump has expressed, as mentioned, his intentions to annex Canada, and then so he's not a values person. What matters for Trump is interest. So these factors might have impacted the dynamic, and could have forced Canada to relook the dynamic. And as Mr. Mark Carney said, that he did acknowledge that there were deep frictions, and there has to be some accountability. He did express his commitment and some intentions that India is one of the biggest, fifth largest economy. India Canada trade is somewhere around $8-9 billion annually, and given the trade tensions globally, it does not make sense to alienate a country like India, which is also somewhat at the heart of global supply chains. So these could
That's
be the
very
factors,
interesting.
yeah, these could be the factors that might have impacted this decision.
Ambassador Fabian, if I can come back to you, Prime Minister Carney has publicly said India is now willing to cooperate with the ongoing investigations into Hardeep Singh Najjar's case. He's talked about a law enforcement dialogue. Do you see India changing its stance, sort of adapting to the new reality that it needs to soften its, because it's already cooperating with the US on Panun?
Well, you're quite right to point out that India has been cooperating with the US in a manner which is so different from the way India has been dealing with Canada. And I suppose there is scope for India to sort of make some changes in its approach in this matter. But only thing is that, these matters are best discussed diplomatically, not
Behind
through
closed
the
doors.
media. And if they are tackled diplomatically, it is my view that a solution can be found.
Singh, do you agree with that? I mean, do you see Delhi navigating this very tricky Khalistan issue by sort of softening its stance? Because I mean, there is also a lot of talk about the fact that Punjab is where a lot of the illegals, immigration happens into Canada, and the drug smuggling. That I mean, there was six Indo-Canadians of Punjabi origin, basically from Brampton, who were caught with 479 kilos of cocaine just a couple of days ago. It was worth $48 million. So these drugs do originate from Pakistan, Afghanistan, and come through Punjab and are then smuggled into Europe. Is this something that could come up in the conversation?
Well, as regards drugs, for that, let me share with you that long time ago, a retired Chief Secretary of Jammu and Kashmir told me, he was on the board of my NGO. He had reason to believe, I'm talking about smuggling, which includes drugs and also counterfeit currency from Pakistan. He had reason to believe that there was a plan to smuggle into India a lot of counterfeit currency, and he informed the BSF. Well, he told me, later he found out that the smuggling did take place and, effective action was not taken. So there's a lot of weakness in the system, Now, coming to Canada, I want to make one more point. India, to my mind, has been taking a position which is slightly impractical. India cannot say that there should be no separatist propaganda in Canada. What I have been maintaining when I was there was that let there be separatist propaganda, but if any of those people are threatening Indian entities, if they are carrying out action which is sort of, injurious to Indian entities, then strict action should be taken by Canada under its laws and under its obligations under the Vienna Convention. Now, I'm sorry to say, Canada had not been doing it to the correct extent. RCMP and other agencies have been a little lackadaisical. Now, let us hope that there will be change in that regard with the new Prime Minister. Then it will be easier for India to also to take a slightly, different position in regard to the Niger matter.
So basically a break from Justin Trudeau's anti-India tirade. Mr. Singh, if you could come in and comment on that.
You see, Nina, if you remember, I've been covering Canada for a long time, writing about Canada. And moment the leadership is changed, the attitude of India towards Canada changes. Narendra Modi came to Canada last in 2015 on a bilateral visit. Now he's coming after 10 years. Indian Prime Minister, probably they had problems with the Trudeau family. When Mrs. Indira Gandhi.
Yes, that's a very interesting story.
Yeah, then she had a problem. And then she tried for nuclear explosions, which Canada resented. They said, we have given this material for civil purposes, not for explosions. And then Canada imposed sanctions. And India and Canada had their diplomatic relations snapped. And then something worked between the two countries and the relations were restored. And when conservatives came to power, India and Canada, when they signed bilateral, whatever the statement is issued after the two prime ministers meet, it was all donkey and dory, everything was fine. There was no mention of Khalistan in 2015. And 2016, it started with at the full throttle. Okay, Canada's soil is being used. 2015, there was nothing. They were signing agreements left and right everywhere. And a year later, when Justin Trudeau, younger Trudeau, came into power, the whole government of India went anti-Canada. You see, this is now Trudeau is gone.
So are you saying that it was India that stepped up the?
No, I don't know. I don't know. But there has to be something in between. That's why the relations, whenever the Trudeau family was in power, if you look at without comments, just as a matter of fact, the relations between India and Canada were at the lowest ebb when Trudeau family was in power in Canada. When conservatives or any other leader was there, even Jane Chrétien, he was a liberal leader. Relations were good. He came to India. He opened Chandigarh Consulate General, and so many things were signed between India and Canada when Jean Chrétien was the Prime Minister. But moment power shifted to Trudeau family, the problem started. I don't know. When Trudeau went to India, the way he was treated, and the way the two leaders met at different summits on the sidelines of different summits, G7 or G20, it's all open. Now, the main issue remains between India and Canada, whenever it's raised, is Khalistan issue. The use of Canadian land for anti-India activities. That is the only issue. Otherwise, people to people, we have the strongest relations. Business, as far as we have been, like I have been listening for the last 15, 20 years, both countries are working for us to signing an FTA, which has not been signed. They wanted 15 billion bilateral trade by 2015. It's 2025, it's still not reached that level. So there is so much of scope for bilateral trade, which will benefit industrial houses, business houses, agriculture production, everything between the two countries. But it's not happening. Something comes in between, and every time there is something good is going to happen, the bogey of Khalistan is raised, which is detrimental to both to India and Canada, and also to people of the two countries, because we have such a strong people-to-people relationship. So I don't know how the two countries, when they meet in G7 on the sidelines, the Indian Prime Minister and Canadian Prime Minister, how they have been talking, law enforcement dialogue is on and rule of law will prevail, everything will prevail, but issues also will continue to prevail. So they've
also talked about Carney himself has talked about fortifying critical mineral supply chains.
That's right. This is what they keep on saying. Because I have read all the previous, whatever the joint communiques were issued when Dr. Manmohan Singh visited Canada for G20 summit in 2010. Then Modi came on bilateral, first Prime Minister to come on a bilateral visit. Now Modi is again here on G7 summit. So issues are there for a long time. They are sitting there, and they are raised as and when it's convenient to create some sort of situation that will say, okay, Canada is not cooperating, India is not cooperating, or thing like this. So, but people are confused. Okay, how come the things were so good in 2015, how they went bad in 2016? And now how the things are changed, now Canada is inviting Indian Prime Minister.
Yes. If I can come to you, Amit Kumar, the G7 is going to be the forum where, where the US president himself could, be finding his, common cause with other leaders on securing these critical mineral supply chains. Do you think, there is a deal? I mean, he's done a deal with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. He's also done a deal just on Tuesday with China. So what is India's strategy? What is it that India is looking for by attending the G7?
See, G7, as you mentioned, you referred to the critical minerals and rare earths. They happen to be the hot topic of geoeconomics at this point of time, especially because in response, ever since came back to power, he started slapping tariffs left, right, and center, and then eventually found that China retaliated as well. And in April, China put restrictions on 7 critical these rare earth minerals
Yes.
and the related magnets, which usually find applications in automotive and aviation sector. Now, China is the preponderant power when it comes to critical minerals and rare earth minerals. It produces somewhat about 60% of the world's rare earth elements and about 90 and processes about 90% of those rare earths. So this gives China some huge dominance in the supply chain, right? And G7 is a platform where you could raise these issues like geoeconomic dominance with respect to rare earths, because this gives China an advantage which it is not afraid to leverage, not afraid to capitalize, and not afraid to weaponize. So, of course, at G7, I'm very sure that the issue of rare earths mineral would be now. This is a global benefit that a solution on or some sort of an agreement over how you diversify the global supply chains when it comes to rare earths, and how do you make the global supply chain more resilient given China's monopolistic dominance in the sector. Now, where does this leave India? So, what during my I've been reading about this, and what I have found is that the treatment that has been meted out to India on this front has been worse than uh, what US has been meted out. So if you after the restrictions were imposed from April, the supplies stopped, and Beijing's responses so far suggest that a discriminatory policy designed to subvert and stall New Delhi's operations or India's automotive operations have been brought in.
Yes.
Yeah. So as for now, I mean, as for the latest reports, about 30 of the applications the new requirements required India to have a end user verification. And while 30 of the applications, 30 of these applications from Indian automakers have gained the government of India's approval, they have not gained an approval. Their suppliers have not gained an approval from the authorities of China. And even though several other applications from other countries apart from the US who have applied have got the clearances. Now, this is even as China committed to the US to speed up the approvals and licenses. Although, mind you, it were the US and China which were engaged in this tariff war and export control war.
But
And
Amit Kumar, you also have the Chinese Vice Foreign Minister
yeah,
Sun Weidong visiting India
yeah,
and basically they will talk about the same subject.
yes,
So
yes.
these applications will it see China pushing for some kind of an easing? I mean, will India be pushing for some kind of easing restrictions?
See, from what we have observed so far, it doesn't seem like Chinese are very keen on approving these licenses. As I told you already, other applications and from other countries have been approved.
Yes,
Even
but not India.
yeah, even US companies have got approvals, right?
Yeah.
The reports by Reuters claim that Beijing has already granted licenses to suppliers of America's top 3 auto companies. And then again, post London negotiations, you have the situation where they have agreed to scale back on these export restrictions.
Okay, so
And
to come back to G7, Ambassador Fabian, India has got a foot in the door basically with this invitation, and there is a lot of disquiet in London, Paris, and Berlin about Trump's foot dragging on confronting Russia. What does India stand to gain by attending G7? Does it want to become a member of this collective security grouping? Because there is BRICS is about to is also going to happen very shortly, and the BRICS's message has always been that it wants to replace G7. So, where does India stand on this? Where does the G7 stand on India? And and what is India going to do? I mean, is it going to play along with Russia and China on replacing the dollar economy?
Well, lots of questions. First thing is that as regards any, rapprochement between Russia and America is concerned, India has no problem. India would welcome it. As you know, diplomacy means dancing with more than one partner at a time, and India is very good at it. Now, as regards, what will happen at the G7, as I said earlier, the host has made it abundantly clear that he wants to keep it rather abridged and
No,
agreeable.
I basically meant, what does India hope to achieve from G7?
Well, as far as India is concerned, the very fact that Canada had to issue the invitation shows India's preeminence in the global politico-economic field. You see, and
Khalistan notwithstanding.
Well, as regards Pakistan, you see, we have to understand one thing. That is, it is true that Pakistan exports terror to India, but it exports terror only to India, not to other countries. And in the case of Khorasan, ISIS Khorasan, which includes Afghanistan, America is dependent on Pakistan's collaboration in fighting that sort of ISI terror. And
We'll get to that in a minute. We'll get to that in a minute. But what I wanted to find out is what is the G7 expect from India, and what is India going to walk away with after G7? Does it have a strategy? Does it have a plan?
Okay. Now, the short answer is that, when we speak of G7, we assume that it is a coherent, monolithic entity. It is not. It is very, very divided. So what America wants from India is different from what Canada wants from India. So I do not expect the G7 to come out with any indication of what it wants from India.
So you're just saying it was just a prestigious show to be present there along with the world leaders, other world leaders?
Well, it's not only prestige. It also shows India's importance as an economic power and as a rising diplomatic power.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair. Mr. Singh, if I can bring you back in, given Donald Trump's nasty prods at Canada, and all these, the tariffs and the destruction that he's meting out to Canada's industry, do you think he'll be? How will he be handled by Mark Carney?
You see, India has to re-establish itself after what it experienced during its operations against Pakistan. Though India claimed to be getting a lot of support from the world over, but when the conflict started, not many countries, not many friendly countries stood by India. India felt isolated. Now, India has a point to prove. They want to go to G7 to prove themselves, as everybody says they are fifth largest economy of the world. But India has to re-establish itself by coming to G7. Now, when US is not that supportive, neither Russia is that supportive as India was expecting them to be. During conflict with Pakistan, you see what support India got. Except for a few statements and some attempts to play for a truce in the conflict. That's all. Pakistan had got more support. Turkey came out openly in support of Pakistan. So India has a point to prove. Okay, no, we must. India's bubble is. I feel its bubble is somewhere deflated somewhere. This conflict, just a short conflict, has opened India's eyes. Now, when they need the sport, that sport was not that forthcoming as India was expecting. So India
basically, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for Prime Minister Modi.
India to reassert itself and tell G7 yes, we are a strong, thriving economy, and we can play a role. And now, when the world is engaged in a tariff war, India has the opportunity for people to come invest and trade with India. India is a country which offers so much of opportunities. So this is
Yes.
what I think the message India will be taking is economic message rather than any political, any other message. So they want to reassert or claim, yes, we are an emerging economy. Whatever is happening, we are non-aligned and we can still play a role. And now see the world, the conflicts the world over. Now recent Israel, Iran, Russia, Ukraine, everywhere. India wanted to stay neutral, but now when they were in conflict, so India did, I think, did experience something which it never thought would happen to it. So I think India will go to not only to open new vistas for trade and economic cooperations, but also to improve its image. Now, why India need to send delegations to different countries to tell the world what was their stand on Pakistan and terrorism coming from Pakistan? Why? Because
Yes, I agree.
if they were so well placed and so well taken by the world as leaders of BRICS and other countries and whatever the communities and G20 when they organized as the president last year. So what happened in within a year?
Yeah.
Why India didn't get vociferous support from the nations it stood by? It has been supporting them.
Yeah.
But
So, Mr. Amit
yeah,
Kumar, do you have an insight into what happened at the recent G7 finance ministers meeting? Do you have any idea what happened?
Yeah, see, the finance minister meeting happened only weeks before. I think, and the main agenda that I think was talked about during that meeting was how do the countries tackle the China shock. See, today China is the world's largest trading partner for over 120 countries, and if you compare it with a time in 2001, US happened to be the topmost trading partner for around 120, 130 countries. But and discussions therefore were around addressing this trade imbalance that has been created by China. Now, today, China accounts for about 30% of the global manufacturing output, both by value and volume. And if you remember, as the year started, China announced that it recorded a trade surplus of around $1 trillion in 2024. And an interesting bit about that is 70% of that came from US, EU, and India. About $300 billion from the trade surplus was generated from the US market, 300 from European Union, and another 100 from billion from India. So clearly, this has created a problem. Now, this is a geopolitical problem that you have a rising power that has replaced an existing status quo power, but is trying to replace the status quo's power. But then the problem is also economic, right? Because change in dynamics is to a great extent is also a result of structural problems within the Chinese economy, right? And the accusation on China, and rightly so, from all the developed countries and the developed world, is that China engages in unfair trade practices, which include efforts to ensure a surplus, domestic savings rates over its investment rates, financial repression of the population, suppressed interest rates, currency devaluation, and massive subsidy to its industries. What together these things have done is that they have suppressed and subdued China's domestic consumption while creating an industrial overcapacity. And in turn, this has brought eroded global competition and therefore deindustrialized countries and inflicted a China shock on the world. And this is what the G7.
So the finance ministers are basically going to tackle that issue together. Will they discuss it again?
the thing is that there was, before Trump came to power, there was some sort of consensus that was emerging that China's industrial overcapacity has to be tackled, and therefore you need and some of the solutions that cropped up was that some sort of India, US, EU trilateral alliance has to come up to
Yes.
force China into submitting and scaling back on some of these unfair trade practices. But then Trump came in and he slapped tariffs uh, across across the board and against all the countries, and that has somewhat taken back. Countries have become more hesitant whether now dealing with one largest economy in the world, second largest economy,
Yeah.
economy in the world is one thing, but then if you're in a contentious position with both the largest economies in the world, it does not make for a good situation, right? So
Yeah.
that has scaled back the consensus, and that it has become tricky. Although it still serves in their interest to have some sort of dialogue and solution to this China shock. And that was
Okay.
basically
That's very interesting. No, the other big development this week has been something that should have really definitely rattled Delhi. This is despite all the negative press in our local media, and as Mr. Singh rightly said, despite our parliamentary delegations going out into the world to to brief them on Terroristan, Pakistan is on a roll. It has dramatically increased its defense budget. The US Central Command Chief, this General Michael Kurilla, his lavish praise on Pakistan, Ambassador Fabian, if you notice. He's called it a valuable ally in countering terror. He's revealed that he's been working with the Pakistan Army chief on, the Taliban, alongside the Taliban, and going after as you said, Islamic State Khorasan. So, the US has provided intelligence, gathering help to Pakistan. So, this whole business about praising Pakistan for handing over Mohammed Sharifullah, the man who's behind that Abbey suicide attack in 2021. All of these things, are a little bit, I'm sure, unsettling, particularly because now Field Marshal General Asim Munir, Pakistan's army chief, is going to attend the US Army Day celebrations on Saturday, June 14th, which incidentally also happens to be Donald Trump's 79th birthday. So the red carpet is being rolled out for Munir. What are the implications, Ambassador, for India, of the United States bringing Pakistan back into the strategic sort of narrative?
Well, let me put it this way. There are many reasons why General Munir was invited and the red carpet was rolled out. One of the reasons is that President Trump's son had met General Munir in the context of the family company's interest in cryptocurrency.
Okay.
And as you know, the same team met also the Prime Minister of Pakistan.
This is the World Liberty Financial.
That's right. So that is point number one. Point number two is that, as you also mentioned, Pakistan is needed by United States in the case of Khorasan. And the third point is that Pakistan, with 240 million population, in nuclear power is an important factor. Some of the Indian leaders, thank God, not from the government, but other leaders have been saying we shall split Pakistan into 4 parts.
Yes.
Now, such talks, I'm afraid, will have a negative impact on the outside world. That gives the impression that India is not serious about finding a good neighborly relationship with Pakistan. You see? So that problem also is there. But I think given all that, I think it is possible for classical diplomacy to resolve problems. And let us hope that classical diplomacy will be made use of as early as possible by all concerned, not only by India.
Do you have a comment on this General Kurilla's statement that US can have a relationship with India as well as have a relationship with Pakistan? Because Pakistan has got very powerful backers now across the world. It's got China, who are backing it on the China-Pakistan economic corridor. In fact, before General Kurilla talked about, the relationship, the joint, operations between Afghanistan and Pakistan. The Afghan foreign minister was seen alongside the Pakistani foreign minister and the Chinese in Beijing recently. And China is pushing for its J-35A stealth fighter aircraft, which is clearly a rival to the US F-35. So is this something that India can live with? So where do we stand?
Well, I will go back to Chanakya, who said long time ago that for every country among its neighbors, there is at least one neighbor which treats that country as a natural enemy. Rightly or wrongly, for good reasons or bad reasons, that's a different matter. And I'm afraid in the case of India, we have two such neighbors who want to treat us as their natural enemy for reasons best known to them, because India has no bad intentions towards them. And between these two, there is a deep nexus. India has to take that into account while
Yes.
Navigating the rather difficult and deep waters of geopolitics in India's neighborhood.
That's right. Very well put. Very well put. And what you said about Trump's business interests driving his foreign policy are quite interesting because, as you rightly said, officials from Trump's son, Eric Trump's firm, World Liberty Financial, did meet Pakistan's Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif and Asim Munir and offered to help build Pakistan's blockchain infrastructure and its crypto coin remittances, and there's also a Texas-based businessman called Gentry Beach, who's a hedge fund manager and a friend of Donald Trump Jr., who led a US investor delegation to Pakistan, looking to invest in real estate, mining, energy. This is what, and India, we don't know where India should be worried about this, what it can do to tackle it. But equally, Amit Kumar, if I can come back to you, the challenge that China poses to India isn't the only thing. So also the India-Europe relationship, we have, is this an opportunity for India to forge a better relationship with the European Union, for example? The India-Europe Free Trade Agreement is hanging fire. And although the India-Middle East Europe economic corridor was a very, very good move, but now Iran, Israel, and all of that is throwing that into jeopardy. So, what do you have to say? Do you think this G7 could see India reaching out, possibly to the leaders of the European Union, laying the ground for cooperation in artificial intelligence and quantum computing, outer space, green technologies?
Yeah, see, Europe has been, European Union has been a key partner of India, both in terms of trade and security before, right? And ever since Trump has come to power, again, countries have realized that the security cover that the US had over the transatlantic partnership that existed, that still now does not hold that same kind of strength that it used to during maybe Biden or during Obama's time. Now, this has, and again, you had UK before in the European Union when the transatlantic partnership was more solid. But then after the UK made an exit, uh, 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 Europe has more or less has under the leadership of France and Germany is trying to have some sort of a balancing relationship with the leading centers of power, may be that USA, Russia, China, and India. And this, you talked about the threat from India and the economic threat from India. Economic threat from China. Now, see, yeah, it does represent an opportunity at this point of time where India can rebuild and deepen its relationship, especially on the trade front, not much on the security. On security, India will have to look for individual partners, not EU as a whole or Europe as a whole. But insofar as trade is concerned, you mentioned about the free trade agreement. That is again supposed to be India is supposed to get the both the parties are supposed to get it done by 2026, if I'm not wrong. And yes, that would bring and create more opportunities. Now, in the past few years, you have seen that India has had some sort of hesitancy when it comes to concluding bilateral free trade agreements. India pulled out of ours, but that is a huge opportunity. Now, it's a good thing that that the government is again reconsidering its position, although they are going to be bilateral FTAs. It will be more painstaking, but still, I think it's a good start. And the fact that Europe is EU is again India's second largest trade partner in terms of if you look at the bloc as a whole. I think an FTA there would do a lot of
Good.
would have a lot of spillover effects. And Europeans do believe in the functionalism kind of theory of international relations, wherein they see that there are spillover effects of once you try and sort out differences, or you deepen relationship in one sphere, that has positive spillovers in other spaces, and then you'll likely see other cooperation in the technological domains such as quantum computers, space, AI, and maybe data security. So I think that's a good way to do. And I think in the past week, Jaishankar was in Europe. He was touring Europe. And I think that speaks for the priority that India today attaches with Europe. And I think it's a good thing that it would be a good thing if India concludes FTA by next year.
So that should be very interesting. I've only got like 6 minutes left, so if we could have concluding remarks. But I just want to say that there's also Europe's rearm plan that has been talked about. It's basically defense modernization, which could see greater Indo-European security collaboration. And we've already have Rafale, which India wants to move from the transactional arms deal to co-development, which is interesting. So if I could have concluding remarks from you, Mr. Singh, and then Ambassador Fabian and Mr. Amit Kumar, I'd be grateful.
Yeah. Yes, Dina, this is a very well taken point. And now when Canada has made it very clear, this is going European way. It's trying to come out of the shadow of US umbrella. So it is trying to rebuild its defense forces, spending a lot of money on refurbishing, redeveloping, revigorating its defense forces, and also for trade. And see, after Mark Carney took over, so the ministerial visits to Europe have been much more. Like Foreign Minister Nita was in the UK, in France. Their international trade minister was in France. And now the Prime Minister of Great Britain is already here. Luxembourg has opened an office and embassy in Canada. So Canada is looking Europe way. So is India, because India has learned its lessons from, as I mentioned, against action against Pakistan. So India is also moving towards Europe, more towards Europe, thinking it offers much more opportunities for developing trade and for developing economic relations. But like in the process, India didn't get as much from the US as it was expecting. So it's better for India. India thinks, like, why not move towards Europe and have more relations with. You also must remember that when India-Pakistan conflict started, G7 nations came out with a joint statement. They asked both India and Pakistan. They never condemned Pakistan for harboring terrorism. They asked both the countries to act with restraint and bring the hostilities to an end. So this is where India thought G7, G20, it was the president last year. So they will support India and support and condemn Pakistan for its supporting or harboring terrorism. But it didn't happen. So now, best option for India is also to rearm Europe, to go towards Europe, move towards Europe as Canada is doing, and don't think like US will ever will be their biggest support or fan of India, as Indian Prime Minister may be claiming, as he had been claiming, okay, Trump is my friend, Obama is my friend, and whatever. But the test of the time has shown nobody stood by India. So India will have no option but to go the European way and look towards more allies, more friends in European countries in the coming years. And that's why India, if India has to sustain itself as an emerging economic power and as a non-aligned leader, then it has no choice but to look towards Europe. I think that's my viewpoint.
Ambassador Fabian, do you think that India has a chance to reinvent itself by sort of?
Well, let me put it this way. India should have close and cordial relations with the United States, but it is better to shake hands rather than to be hugged, because any hugging by the United States can be asphyxiating. You won't be able to, sort of breathe. Now, at the same time, without in any way diminishing India's relations with the United States, India should have more relations with Europe and other countries, not only Europe, I mean, say Africa, Latin America, So, and that is what India is trying to do. And I should say, with reasonable success. We should not attach too much importance to the fact that a Pakistani general was invited to, for the US Army Day, or that countries did not come out with statements of support in regard to the air war between India and Pakistan, because let's understand, no country wants a big war between India and Pakistan. And let's also bear in mind, India does not want a war with Pakistan. India did take certain military action in response to a terrorist attack. And India made it abundantly clear. And Pakistan had the choice to leave it at that. But then they made another decision, and India had to retaliate. Otherwise, India has no plans to attack Pakistan and dismember it and all that. I agree that there are some political leaders who talk like that, but that is not government of India's policy. So as I see it, these are tricky waters, but I'm confident that Indian diplomacy will navigate these tricky waters with considerable success.
Thank you. Amit Kumar, do you think that with the US turning inward and China seeking new ways to dominate the world, India has got a huge challenge ahead?
Yeah, of course. See, the biggest challenge in the world in terms of in the economic realm that it faces today is the China shock and the Chinese economic coercion, dumping of Chinese goods, cheap Chinese good, which is industrializing countries, and then you have a form of coercion again from the US economy in terms of tariffs. India finds itself in a precarious position where US being its largest export market, and then China being its largest source of imports, right? And both you have a kind of situation where you have problems. So yes, today India faces this kind of situation, and the situation that it faces, it does make sense for it to have a diversified relationship again with the EU, and EU becomes important, EU as a whole, and then again you have countries like France, Germany, and you also have a country outside of UK, Britain. So yes, and add to that countries in Southeast Asia. So it does make sense for having a diversified economic relations, given the threat that India faces from China and the turbulent relations now you have in economic terms with the US.
Very well put. So in conclusion, have we actually upset Washington? I mean, there is some speculation that India is striking the Noor Khan base in Rawalpindi a no-go for even the Pakistan Air Force, and where the US maintains its F-16s did not go down well with the US military. So it's India's rise as an economic power, its independence line, 1 foot in the American camp, 1 foot in Russia's, now 1 foot in Europe and France in particular, changed the way Trump's Washington, which is reassessing years of its transatlanticism and ties with the European Union, and how viewing India. So Pakistan has both China, the United States, and the Arab states in its camp. Our strategic autonomy is seen differently from the way that Pakistan pursues its strategic autonomy. Now, Ottawa is in the throes of negotiating a new defense agreement with the European Union. I'd like to see whether India follows suit and where Trump's closeness to Pakistan will lead. Thank you very much, Ambassador Fabian, for your valuable insights. Thank you, Mr. Prabhjot Singh, for lifting the lid on what to expect at the G7 summit and the Khalistan factor. Thank you, Amit Kumar, for the quick lesson on Trump's clever use of tariffs and China's use of trade as an instrument of foreign policy. Thank you, viewers, for watching Global Express. Please click on the New Indian Express website to watch the show.